Along came my ferry.
What happened?
Thank goodness. I thought to myself, that would have been a very expensive ride home, especially at this hour. Scanning my card for the second time that night, I climbed on board and once again grabbed a seat inside the air-conditioned cabin. I rested my head against the glass window and watched outside, taking in the sights of the distant city lights beyond the foggy harbor. I could have dozed off right there and then, to be honest, and I may have, were it not for the almighty bang that startled me out of my relaxed state.
The ferry gates had been absolutely slammed shut with a force well beyond necessary.
Well, this guy must be having a bad day, I thought, and I made a mental note to stay clear of him. I sat back again and continued to gaze out the window as the ferry's engine powered up and we were out on the open water again, this time in the right direction.
Damn it!
I missed my stop? Wiping my bleary eyes, I stretched and took a look around. The first thing I noticed was the fog. It was beginning to clear a little, but it was still hard to see outside. The second thing I noticed was a fellow passenger. I don't know how long I was asleep, but I'm sure I would have heard if we had stopped. I took a glance out of my peripheral.
I'm sure this guy was not here before.
I suppose he could have come down from upstairs or something, but that wasn't the weirdest part.
Really, continue. What was weird?
His seemingly undivided attention squarely on me. There was no mistaking it. He was staring intently right at me. I tried to ignore him, to look out the window, but even then I could see clearly his wide eyes in the reflection. He was giving me the creeps. I decided to get up and get some fresh air. Primarily, I just wanted to get away from him, to avoid a confrontation with what looked to be a person strung out on some kind of substance. That wasn't entirely uncommon in the city at late hours. I quietly slid out of my row of seats and made a beeline for the rear doors, sliding them open and stepping out on deck into the fresh air. It took me a minute to comprehend what I was feeling, as it was so far outside the realms of normal. The air was freezing cold.
Bear in mind, this is smack in the middle of an Australian summer.
Just moments before, the air had been miserably hot. Boom! Boom! Another two blasts from the ferry's horn rang out in the now bitter cold night. The ferry jerked a little from side to side, so I grabbed hold of the railing as I walked around to the front of the vessel. The lights carved a path through the fog, and I could see we were pulling into Milson's Point. Glancing down at my watch now, I froze in disbelief. It was now 2 a.m. in the morning. That was not possible. For one thing, this stop should be a 5-minute ride at most from Balmain East. And secondly, this ferry route definitely did not run this late. In fact, when I really thought about it, I was surprised there was even a ferry coming back this way in the first place. I couldn't recall, as I was not usually out that late, but I didn't think they ran past midnight, not as far as I knew. As for one running back and forth across the harbor at 2 a.m.
No way. Never has been, likely never will be.
Crash! I jolted back as the ferry came to an abrupt stop. Oh my God.
What happened?
We had hit something.
I knew it. What was that?
I don't know. My anxiety kicked into full gear as I glanced around for the nearest life jacket. Merely seconds later, however, an announcement came over the PA system. Please relax. We are simply adjusting our heading. Return to your seats, please. I slowly made my way back inside, my heart still racing. I decided to take a seat up front this time so I could keep an eye on what was going on. I caught sight of that weirdo on the way past, and there was no mistake. He was staring right into my damn soul.
Really?
What frightened me most was not just the fact that he was staring, but the look in his eyes. It wasn't anger, it wasn't fear, it was concern. He genuinely looked like he was troubled to see me there. He finally looked away as I passed him by and shot him a stare right back, letting him know that he had long since crossed my boundaries. He didn't look annoyed or offended in any way, though. He just looked down at his feet sheepishly. Honestly, that gave me more of a chill than if he had gotten out of his seat and started throwing fists. I continued on up to the front of the ferry and took a seat right next to the window facing out over the bow. There I sat and waited and watched. Onwards we sailed, past the Sydney Harbour Bridge, past the Opera House, and I almost breathed a sigh of relief as we made the turn headed back out to my final stop.
Did you guys stop?
We didn't stop. Instead of continuing on around the bend to Manly Beach, the ferry made a hard right, sailing out beyond the boundaries of the harbor, sailing out into open waters. The fog began to thicken once again, and the frosty air of the night started to seep its way inside the cabin. The ferry was rocking back and forth more violently now as we disappeared into the open ocean, away from the safety of the harbor lights, away from the calm waters within it. My stomach dropped as I felt the boat lift up and over one of the many looming dark waves outside before coming crashing down again. It was, of course, at this point I knew something was very wrong. Lifting my watch up again, I noted the time. 3 a.m. Another hour had passed since we had drifted away from Milson's Point. My head began to spin as I wondered as to the possibilities.
Had this ferry been hijacked?
I ran up the stairs and I bashed on the captain's door. I screamed and shouted, trying to get someone's attention, but no response came. There was nothing more I could do. Defeated, I staggered my way to the back of the vessel, my legs like jelly now, and I collapsed to the floor. I just stared outside. My line of sight from there is a straight shot out through the upper rear doors. Darkness. That was all I could see. There was not even any sign of the vibrant city lights anymore. We were far beyond where any city ferry should be sailing. We were slowly disappearing further and further into the darkness of the South Pacific. So there I laid, and there I watched, as the hours slowly ticked by. Eventually, my eyes could remain suspended no longer, and sleep finally took me.